In the 2 years since making Elusive, I think both Andy and I look back on that time, and I'm quite proud of the film. I'm quite proud of the reviews that it received, even from the Americans and the Canadians that don't believe that there's anything cryptid-like in Britain at all. However, what it has done is, when I look back on the data that we collected, the methodologies that we were using, the practices that we were advocating at that time, I sit back and cringe sometimes, because we've almost helped push forward bad practice, particularly in the tree and stick structures, the photography element of that. I said early on in the research that I put absolutely no weight into the tree and stick glyph structures, that type of evidence, because I think you potentially wasting a lot of time that you could be spending doing something else. Trying to prove the existence of a wild man using sticks and trees is, I can tell you now, it's going to be an absolutely fruitless task, because how does any number of formations in a certain formation, which there are none in exactly the same formation, you might get 2 out of thousands and thousands of images that are identical, and people twist the photo and move the photo around to make these structures look like they're the same. But let's say they are the same. Let's say tomorrow we get 10 images the same, of the same glyph, from dotted and around Britain, of this formation on the ground. What does it prove? Does it prove that it's Bigfoot? Absolutely not. Will it ever prove that it's Bigfoot? Absolutely not. It proves nothing. And that, I don't like saying that. I mean, upon reflection, I'm probably advocated that somewhere along the line. And I can't change people's minds if that's what you want to do. If you see something in that, and certainly I'm not ruling it out entirely. I'm just saying, as a form of evidence, I think we would be headed in a much better direction by gathering prints, for example, potential hair, DNA samples. That is a more scientific form of evidence, certainly more concrete. And it points in a certain direction. Sticks point in no direction at all. Multiple directions, if you like. Could be any number of excuses for finding sticks in a number of formations. It could be nature, it could be kids, it could be bushcrafters, it could be campers, it could be hikers, it could be poachers, it could be travellers. I could go on. I think we really need to stop pushing this as a form of evidence gathering and really focus on the footprints and any form of print, handprints, casts. That's where we need to be taking this. Different environments, for example, can produce different results, as we have found, and that is what is important about on the ground research. You know, I work with people like Paul Sinclair quite a lot, and he's a massive advocate of being out on the ground, out in the environment, experiencing these things, being all over particularly with something like a cryptid that we propose potentially lives, if it's flesh and blood, in these areas of solitude where there are very few people. And Scotland is just the epitome of that. On this trip, we've seen very few people. We're in the middle of a small village. We've seen barely any people. Out on the hills and in the mountains, there is no one around. When you go into the different environments, the different forests, the different types of trees, you can see how nature can repeat patterns. The majority of that is just natural. It really is just natural. A lot of this short film will come across as quite negative, but that's not our intention at all. Our intention is to highlight our own mistakes and highlight that we're in part responsible for pushing forward about practice when researching this kind of thing. And it's allowed. I think I should say that it's allowed. We are allowed to make mistakes. The skeptics would have it, no, you know, you've changed your mind, or you've done a U-turn. Of course, we're allowed to do U-turns. I mean, you get in a lot of these debates with these guys, and they want you to think a certain way and use a certain methodology. in a year's time, when you come back and you change your mind and you use that methodology that they wanted you to use, suddenly you're in the wrong. No, I'm not saying that going forward in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years maybe, a correlation of that data might not be useful, but it will be never held in esteem or of any sort of weight with it. And I think you just have to look at America and Canada to look at how useful has it been to them as evidence. Yeah, not at all. There's no use for it whatsoever. If anything, all it does is gather criticism and shifts the focus off what we're trying to do, we're trying to achieve, and what the witnesses are seeing, because that's what this is about. The witnesses are seeing something. This is not, again, this is not bashing the witnesses, bashing the idea of a wild man in Britain, not at all. It's really about refocusing the researchers, of which there are still not very many in Britain. And Andy and I were partly part of that team that were pushing forward what I consider to be a bad practice, and that's just my opinion. What we should be doing is looking for prints, using people like Jeff Meldrum, sending the prints off for analysis, a more scientific approach. Sticks cannot be sent off for scientific analysis. Most of the researchers are very private. They don't want to share the research. I know researchers that specifically look into the tree and stick structures, and there's no way they're going to share that information. I think it's flawed anyway, and I don't think there's any benefit to doing it. However, that's the reality of it. Some researchers don't want to be part of a team researching something. That's just, I guess it's just the nature of of alternative subjects and people's own experiences of usually witnesses that want to take a personal approach to come to a conclusion about what it is they saw. For Andy and I, we've never witnessed anything, so again, we have totally different perspectives. As individuals, we have totally different perspectives. I have a background in a lot of alternative subjects, ufology being one of them. And I guess the stick structures, to me, represent lights in the sky. They're just as ambiguous as a light in the sky at night. They're next to you, they're pretty much useless. I guess that brings us forward to photo and video. Look how critiqued and how the skeptics attack the Patterson-Gimlin footage. So, absolutely, of course, we should be using photo and video evidence, but we should be doing it in the correct way. We should not be uploading blurry images and snapping randomly in the trees and then circling potential Bigfoots in there. If you can't see it generally after a 10-second look at a photograph, it's probably not there. And by uploading them to the website for new researchers to see, I think what happened is, and I'm as responsible as everybody else, we help push that forward. Oh, this is what people do. I'm new to this. I guess I just go out and take a load of pictures and put them on in the internet groups so people can circle them, and in some respects convince us that there is something in that image. It's a bad practice. There is nothing to be achieved from it. Now, I get that a lot of sharing photographs of tree structures and potential Bigfoots in the trees, it's part of being part of a community. It's sharing, it's conversing. Because if we're not sharing photographs of something, then we're not sharing anything. Whereas what we probably should be doing is having conversations. I know there are a lot more Skype and internet and radio podcasts now, particularly in Britain. They're on the increase, and that's great. There's a lot of those podcasts that I watch. I don't often see blurry photographs used in those, which is great. Whereas on the internet, that's all you see. There's not even a lot of debate now in some of these groups, because a difference of opinion or a critique of a photograph is looked upon as maybe a distraction, maybe quite off-putting for new researchers, maybe quite negative. Maybe if they're a witness, it looks like no one believes what they're saying, which is not true at all. What it is that if we want it to be taken seriously, and for the most part for the witnesses, to give them some sort of closure, which is a hard thing to achieve, I would imagine, once you've seen something strange like that, the way to do that is to do it in a concrete, scientific manner, not using blurry photographs and random stick structures to say that, oh, he saw what he says he saw. Honestly, it just doesn't do him any favours. If anything, it makes him look, makes him look crazy. And I don't use that word lightly, because this movement, just like ufology, there are a lot of people in the movement that want to believe and will fake evidence. There's a little bit of that creeping into the British cryptid scene now. Not a lot, but it is creeping in, and that was inevitable. I think Deb, Andy and I, Adam Bird, I think we said that would happen. The bigger the movement got, it's inevitable that you're going to get one or two crazies coming in, faking evidence, and a lot of those guys have disappeared now. However, it doesn't do the scene any favours whatsoever. I think one of the things that these research trips do into remote locations is that they take you out of your comfort zone. They put you into, particularly at night, and we've had an occasion this week where Darren Howe of the British Bigfoot research team, we were out researching using the night vision, and we heard something rustling in the trees quite close by, a grunting sort of noise, and I'm nudging Darren and saying there's something in the trees, and I pull the torch out and we shine it on the trees, and that's 30 seconds where we're thinking there's something interesting happening here. This is very unusual. I've never heard this sort of thing before, and it was just a sheep in rural Scotland. So the mind can tricks on you out in the field, and that is exactly why, if I'd have been on my own, and that because it was quite a hairy moment, I may have recorded the sound, perhaps because maybe I didn't have night vision. Maybe I captured the sounds in the trees and the movement of the feet and the sound on the ground. I could have easily sold that as a Bigfoot was in Scotland, but because I had Darren Howe there as a witness, that we resolved that relatively easy. I found some prints 2 years ago, and at the time I didn't know what they were. At the time I thought they were human, and looking back now, I still think they're human. I think someone took the shoes off and walked a mile up a craggy hillside. As bizarre as that sounds, I think that's what happened. The look of the foot, the look of the print just doesn't look like a Bigfoot print should, in my opinion. Again, all this is based on American and Canadian research and Russian research, the casts that have been sent in. But had I been using the correct practice and had I cast those prints, then I wouldn't be in this position, because we would probably know one way or the other, or at least we would have some idea of whether it was human. You send that off to someone like Jeff Meldrum, for example, he'll tell you pretty much straight away whether that's a human print or not, or whether there's something interesting about the print, which drives the research forward. So yes, there's absolutely hurdles to get over when you're looking into urban areas, and as Andy McGrath said before in his research, a very small percentage of Britain is urban. And when you come to places like Scotland, for example, going back to the flesh and blood argument, there is absolutely land and food for a flesh and blood cryptid in this part of Britain, absolutely. There's never been any doubt in my eyes about that. There are still huge, massive problems with that. Nevertheless, when you're out researching in these places, hiking in these areas, I guarantee, even for hardened skeptics who often sit at home in the armchair, you get them into this environment. And we haven't even touched some of the more mountainous areas, Wales and Scotland. really remote areas. They haven't been touched. So I think it's a little early in the day to be debunking it and just ruling this out outright. The supernatural angle of this, which is something that I'm willing to look into, and this is not a get out of jail card free, because we can't prove the existence of this cryptid in Britain, so we can't prove it's a physical creature. So it must be supernatural, it must be paranormal. I just think that a lot of the evidence and the lack of solid concrete evidence might point in that direction. It's just something to look at. And if you're not looking in every direction, then maybe you'll miss something. I think that's all. I think in ufology there are skeptics now. There are new declassified projects being released to the public, where skeptics and debunkers in ufology have had to do a 180-degree turn on their opinion about this stuff, because everything that they thought has been completely turned on its head with the release of this new metamaterial research, projects looking into quantum physics and multiple dimensions. Very real projects being looked into by organisations with deep pockets. So that's just, that's a little bit from ufology. It's not necessarily relevant here. What I'm saying is that there are areas, potential areas, that we can look into, because some of the sightings are very paranormal in nature. We want to encourage people to get out there and capture evidence, and it's about, really, it's a time-saving, I guess it's a time-saving exercise for everybody as a whole. If we're all out there using certain practices to try and find evidence, we have a much better chance together than apart. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that if we're individually using different methods that can't be peer reviewed, if you like, and can't be proven, then we're onto a loser straight away. It doesn't do the witnesses. I guess this is what this is about for me as well. The films I make are about witnesses. We're not helping the witnesses in any way, shape or form by using blurry photographs as evidence. It is nonsense. It needs to stop. And I understand that this comes across as very negative, but that's not my intention at all. I want people to get out into the woods. There's not enough of us out there looking for evidence. It's a very difficult thing to do. All the researchers will tell you that 99.999% of the time you're finding absolutely nothing. That's the reality of this. The beauty of it is that you get to see all of Britain. You get to be out in the environment, you get to be out in the countryside, and there's only good things can come from that. But you also get to say that you are out there investigating, where a lot of these critics and skeptics are not. They are sat home in the armchair critiquing and trying to debunk the efforts of researchers and witnesses, which is just another nonsense. So what are the positives in all of this? Well, I think the positives that we can take from this is that the witnesses are certainly seeing something. Let's not forget that. I do these films and I get to meet some fantastic people because of their experiences, and they don't have to share those experiences, but for me, it's really, really important that these boxes are ticked off, that we're objective in what it is we're trying to do, because we are damaging. A lot of these witnesses have had really hard times, and then we come along and we start shoving blurry pictures forward as evidence of their experience. That is not going to work. That is going to really worsen the situation. It's a bad practice. We need to stop it. On the upside of this, what you will find when you're out in these communities is that you get out on these research trips with like-minded people and just throw ideas around. Make a short film, make a YouTube channel, highlight your mistakes, and have some fun with it. It's not, a lot of this comes off as quite serious, but in the end, we're looking for a cryptid in Britain. It's you've got to have a bit of fun with this. He may or may not exist. We're allowed an opinion about that. My personal opinion about whether Bigfoot exists, I don't know. And that is sitting on the fence. It really is. I think something is out there. There is too much talk in these small villages and communities about people seeing something. When I did that research with Paul Sinclair in East Yorkshire, these places in Scotland, these small villages are the same. No one, if you see someone, which is rare in these small villages, they're not going to talk about this sort of stuff. And I guess part of that investigative process, knocking on doors, being turned away, it only takes that one witness, it only takes that one farmer, it only takes that one guy in the petrol station on a remote road in Scotland, for example, that says, might put you onto a nugget of real information that might lead you somewhere. It's not all negative. It is a difficult job to do, but I enjoy it. I love it, and I think I would certainly encourage more people to get out there with your cameras and to do this short film. So I know, I apologise if it's come across as like Andy and I are preaching this, you know, you lot of fools. No, we helped create this problem, and now we're trying to rectify that. And it's not a big deal. It's not everybody actually. It's, I would say 50% of the researchers out there are really just engaging in a conversation. It's not, there's no malice in sharing a blurry photo. You know, none of this is done on purpose. It's just a bad habit that we need to get out of. And also, look, you've got to have fun with this. These trips are great. These research trips are great. They're tiring, but they have to be done. It's doing this sort of thing on your own is hard. It's particularly if you're a witness. If you've not got anybody, I know from the years in ufology and being contacted by witnesses that have had nobody. It's a very difficult place to be in for a long time. A lot of the witnesses have no one to speak to about this, and sharing a blurry photograph sometimes is just partaking in a conversation about this phenomena. It's just about some form of engagement for them, just literally company. They find comfort in that, in, you know, being in and around like-minded people. So it's not a crime to upload a blurry picture. It's not a crime to upload a picture of sticks. It's just not very useful. And let's be honest, if we look back at some of the internet groups, if I look back at my page, my catalogue of YouTube uploads, for example, I'll be there talking about stick structures. But this is the point, I've come to that point now where you have to be more objective. I'm not scared of admitting that I've made mistakes in researching these topics. That's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Particularly when the scientific method is being proposed as the only way. It's not the only way, but it's the best way. Now, a lot of what's proposed by some researchers is only guesswork, but I think there's probably some credence in it, in the fact that when you go into the large plantation forests in Britain, a lot of the time there is absolutely no life in these places. They're dark, they're damp, there's no edibles in there. But I guess in winter, these places are where the wildlife, the deer for example, and the pheasants all retreat. When the months get colder, they will retreat into that warmer environment of those plantation forests. So I guess the colder months might be a place to research those sorts of environments. For the rest of the year, I think we should be looking into the more forests with more mixed species of trees, deciduous trees, and a more open environment, because as soon as we spent a day researching one of the plantation forests and saw absolutely no life whatsoever, and then we moved to a more natural, ancient woodland, and straight away there was wildlife everywhere. And these small differences are really important for a researcher. These are the small little details that are very useful in your research. You can save yourself a lot of time and energy by taking note about these subtle changes and the differences in environments when you're out there. Take a little notepad. Use social media for that purpose, to engage in a conversation, not to upload just blurry images, for example. Take images of the woodland, the environment, to demonstrate your point.